Chapter 7. The Ogrons Invade. Further out in space, millions of miles from the present position of the Rock of Judgement, was a small cluster of luminous green fluid particles. A large black spaceship sat within the folds of the cloud, concealed from the prying sensors of any other craft that might pass through this remote sector of space. The ship consisted of a bulbous snout and a bulging body section. Its dented hull was marked and scarred by the countless landings and blastoffs it had accomplished in a variety of planetary atmospheres. Bolted to its side was a stubby neutron cannon. The black ship began to turn, slowly at first. It steadied and zipped out of the cloud, its roaring rear thrusters trailing thick, superheated fumes. Spigot crushed another plastic cup. Unfortunately, he had forgotten to drink all of the coffee that had been inside it, and the scalding liquid splashed over his sweater.
"Do try and be more careful,"
the doctor advised, handing him a napkin.
"We'll get nowhere with you being so jumpy."
They had returned to Spigot's cabin to wait for Romana, as arranged. Spigot had spent anxious minutes going over the facts of the case and failing to see any pattern. "Trouble is, Doctor," he said, mopping up the mess, "there's no reason why this person should kill Zai, is there?"
"Should there be?"
The doctor had returned to the study of the file on Zaius. He tapped the page he was reading.
"It says here that one of Zaius's great weaknesses was her irrational hatred of all humans. She was extremely intelligent, yes, but sometimes she lost control and just killed the nearest human for the sake of it."
Spigot lit another of his cigarettes. "But we're not looking for Zaius, Doctor. Zaius is dead. We know that." The doctor vaulted from his chair, seemingly consumed by some revelation.
"Do we, Spigot? Do we really? We know that she was put to the particle reverser, but do we know that she's dead? Do we even know what dead means? How wonderful is death, death and his brother sleep."
He coughed and pointed to Spigot's cigarette.
"Please put that out, it stops me from thinking."
Spigot ignored his request. "What do you mean, do we know she's dead? Of course we do."
"But how do you kill someone, eh? Eviscerate them, crush them, reverse their particles? But do the dead always stay dead,
Spigot found himself almost disturbed by the doctor's intense gaze and ominous words, but common sense prevailed. "I thought we'd decided that there was no ghost." The door of the cabin opened and Romana walked in. Without any attempt at greeting, she asked urgently, "Doctor, what do you know about helicon?"
"It's a soft mineral," he replied, "and not a very useful one, either. Low conductivity, low strength, low interest. Don't they mix it with balls ore to line pipes?"
"Nothing else?" Spigot spoke up. "It's worthless. Any school kid knows that." Romana looked between them. "It might not be." The doctor tilted his head, a sign Spigot recognized as a portent of trouble.
"Romana, I'm glad to see you taking an interest in planetary geomorphology, but please try to keep your mind focused on one thing at a time."
He turned to Spigot.
"This is her trouble, you see. No concentration."
Romana went on. "Doctor, Stokes made a mask of Zaius using helicon. It was taken from the gallery this evening, the only item that was removed." She lowered her voice. "Do you think the mask might be connected to the killing?" His reaction was immediate. He raced for the door of the cabin, his long legs taking him from one side of the room to the other with a couple of loping strides.
"Well, come on then."
Romana raced after him. "Where are we going?"
"To find Pierpoint. Do try to concentrate."
Spigot tapped Romana on the shoulder. "Would you mind telling me what's going on?" "I'm afraid I would," Romana shouted back as she raced after the tasseled ends of the doctor's scarf, which were disappearing around the corner of the corridor. "There isn't time." Sham watched anxiously as K9 continued his silent communion with the security computer. The technicians, now feeling more than slightly redundant, were huddled in a bemused group on the far side of the room. The big screen of the control center still displayed the revolving cylinder that served as a graphic representation of the system. K9's investigations had revealed the full extent of the corruption of the computer, and the cylinder was now cracked and chipped in several places. Sham knelt to address K9. How was this done? He asked incredulously. The entire system's been degraded. K9 was too busy to reply.
Please do not ask questions until analysis is complete.
It cannot answer you, Pierpoint told Sham, because this is another of Spigot's distractions. Such interference is impossible. This, he pointed to the screen, is supposed to fool us. They've programmed the machine to falsify its findings.
The door of the control center opened, and Margo walked in. She was dressed in a clean white tunic. Her movements were as they had always been, calm and efficient. It was as if the disturbances of the previous days had not occurred. "Sir," she addressed Pierpoint. He hurried to her side and took her arm.
What are you doing here?
He asked.
I advised you to relax in your cabin.
She stared back at him. Sham noted an unusually insolent tone in her reply. "I wish to apologize for my behavior, sir, and to convey my willingness to submit to your authority in person." Pierpoint relaxed his grip on her arm.
There is no need for that. Please, return to your cabin.
K9 spoke up.
Warning! Danger! This station is in danger!
Pierpoint turned abruptly.
What is it talking about now?
He waved Sham forward.
Disconnect it!
Warning! Danger!
K9 continued.
The security net has been blinded to signals on band 456601 of the Hyper 3 carrier beam since February 28th. My sensors indicate that a coded signal on that frequency is now being transmitted from this location.
He whirred and clicked, his delivery speeding up.
Furthermore, interference extends to override of the station's transmat system. Records of transmat communications on February 28th have been falsified.
It's talking nonsense,
Pierpoint insisted.
Disconnect it!
Sham moved forward to comply, but then a door crashed open and the doctor stormed in, followed by an anxious Romana and a breathless Spigot.
I'm afraid he isn't, Pierpoint. K9 never talks nonsense. Well, hardly ever.
The High Archon flushed.
I've had quite enough of you and your colleagues, Doctor. I must ask you to leave immediately. I shall be making a complaint to the police authority over your The doctor reached forward and shook him by his scrawny shoulders. Listen! Your computer has been overridden by an expert, Zeus!
Pierpoint knocked his hands away.
Dr. Zeus is dead. I saw her die.
Spigot leapt forward. It sounds crazy, I know, but we think she's found a way to bring herself back to life.
Your behavior is starting to bore me, Spigot,
Pierpoint said.
Get off this station, or I'll have you thrown off.
So, the normals were perhaps not all so stupid. These investigators had uncovered her presence, but it was of no consequence. They would soon be dead. She looked around the control center. She had to complete the task she had come here for, and this argument would serve as a good cover. The control panel of the security computer was unattended. She went to it and reached a hand out to a particular panel of switches. Her fingers fluttered over the keyboard in a blur. She nodded, satisfied, as a row of green lights flicked to red and then died. And the normals believed this was a sophisticated system. Unnoticed by those engrossed in the argument, a wisp of smoke started to curl from the collar of the ridiculous mobile computer. Zeus was pleased. It was a conceited, ugly little thing. She walked from the control center unnoticed and made for the nearest lift. Safely inside, she took the silver mask from her tunic and clamped it over her face, then pressed the control that would take her down to level 4.
Helicon is a quite worthless mineral, Pierpoint insisted. As any school child could tell you, it is used sometimes as part of an alloy to line pipes, I believe.
It may have all kinds of properties we can't comprehend, the doctor went on. Listen, you must evacuate this station and call for help from 5.
Certainly not.
Pierpoint straightened himself.
I do not intend to evacuate on the strength of one very straightforward murder and a technical fault. Now you are going to leave. Do I have to use force? Pierpoint! The doctor stormed. This station is in terrible danger.
the argument was interrupted by a high-pitched mechanical groan that issued from K9's voice box. A steady stream of smoke came from the robot dog. His casing glowed red. "K9!" cried Romana. She hurried to his side.
Imperative disconnect, mistress.
He was able to gasp as he was overpowered.
Power supply to systems overloaded. Imperative disconnect.
Romana attempted to obey, but the heat surrounding K9 was too great, and she snatched her hand back. A roar started to come from the console to which he was connected.
January is the equivalent.
K9 rambled, his delivery speeding up.
Harriet married a soldier. Planetary dentistry varies. If Otto has 6 models, who is Vasilovich?
The doctor pulled Romana back and cried, "Down!" He grabbed Spigot with his other hand and flung them both to the floor. Pierpoint, Sham, and the technicians, warned by instinct of what was to happen, covered their eyes and dropped to the ground. The console bellowed, groaned, and erupted in a shower of dazzling green sparks. Molten blobs of what had been circuit boards and processor links spattered the occupants of the room. A second explosion tore through adjacent consoles. Palls of choking black smoke were released. The lights flickered, went out, and were replaced by emergency systems that glowed feebly. Typically, the doctor was the first to react. Covering his mouth and nose with his scarf, he stumbled through the smoke to where he remembered the fire apparatus was located. He hefted the fire extinguisher and tossed it to Romana. She caught it and started to beat back the flames with jets of foam. The doctor joined her, and they had the blaze under control in under a minute. The odorous smoke started to clear slowly, and K9 was revealed. His personal defenses had protected him from much external damage, although his shell was blackened and scarred, but his head was angled upward and his eye screen was unlit. Romana stepped forward, carefully, and wiped the foam from his casing.
"His interrogators have gone," the doctor diagnosed. "But he's designed to shut down if something like this happens. I wonder why he didn't."
Romana patted the nose of the deactivated dog. "He was trying to warn us. Don't worry, K9, we'll soon have you patched up." To her astonishment, K9's eye screen flashed briefly.
"Thank goodness," said the doctor. "For a moment there, K9, I thought your goose had been cooked."
K9's head moved slightly, and he said in a small voice,
Not understood, Master. This unit does not contain Earth waterfowl.
His voice slurred, and he became inactive again. Spigot had picked himself up from the floor. Coughing and choking, he joined them at the burnout wrecks of the computer consoles. "Flaming hell," he said.
"Quite,"
the doctor observed. Spigot looked along the lines of smoldering data stores. "Looks like they lost it all. Did your K9 do all of that?" "It wasn't K9, Romana said. "The power of that computer was stepped up. The failsafes must have been overridden, and only a genius could have done it," she and the doctor said together.
"A genius like Zeus," the doctor completed.
He stopped abruptly and put a hand to his head.
"Of course! The woman who was here,
Romana supplied the name. "Margo?"
"Margo. She must have set the power to overload. It would explain her breakdown," he rationalized. If she's possessed by the mask," Romana went on. She picked up a cooling chunk of debris from the nearest console. "And she's left us defenseless." In the grim silence that followed these words, she heard a clamor build up outside as the citizens of the Rock began to realize that something was wrong. Pierpoint staggered up to them. His scorched eyebrows and sooty cheeks might have amused Romana in different circumstances. It seemed that, at last, the truth was beginning to reach him. "Doctor," he said urgently, "K9 said that a signal was being sent from here on a frequency that the security net had been blinded from picking up. If that's true, somebody out there knows our position, and without control of our laser cannon, we can do nothing to repel them."
Spigot flung his arms wide in frustration. "Oh, that's just great, man. So we're sat here like a bomb cake waiting for the toaster." Pierpoint turned to Sham.
"Get after Margo. Find her. She's gone insane."
"Right away, sir." Sham turned to leave.
"But you must not kill her, Sham," Pierpoint said firmly. "She must not die."
Sham hurried away. Romana righted one of the plastic chairs that had been knocked down by the explosion and sat dispiritedly. If she sent for accomplices, they could arrive at any moment. The doctor waved an arm airily.
Not necessarily. She may have done all this just to shut K9 up. I shouldn't worry if I were you, Romana.
The asteroid lurched to one side and they were all thrown to the floor again. Romana lifted her head and looked across at the doctor.
Of course,
he said.
I could be wrong about that.
The corridors of the administration offices on level 4 were silent and dark. Every step Sham took along the stone-flagged walkways retorted sharply like a book slammed shut. The emergency light served only to increase the empty strangeness of a place that had been designed in part to intimidate those who entered it. Sham stopped. Had there been a noise from the darkened alcove to his left? He unholstered his blaster, swallowed, and called. Margo? Margo, it's Lieutenant Sham. I've come to help you. There was no response. He stepped closer. Margo? Something glinted silver in the pitch blackness ahead. She was upon him in less than a second. His blaster was kicked from his grip with one upward sweep of her leg. The beautiful, blank silver mask touched his face. It smelt of iron, the way blood smells of iron. Hello, soldier boy, she hissed. He whimpered and tried to pull away, but her hands were tight around his waist. Her breath was hot. One of her hands reached out and brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. What are you doing? He protested, more disgusted than scared. She always wanted to kiss you, Margo spat. I know that, you see. I have looked into her mind. I know her memories, her fears, her desires. The small emotions of the normal. He struggled in her grip. Why are you doing this? She clutched him closer. He caught a glimpse of her eyes through the slits of the mask. They were shiny, round, and black. Why? You, normal, ask me why? But then how can you know? How could you ever know the hate I feel? He struggled again, and she threw back her head, exhilarated. Go on, squirm for me. I find it amusing. Sham found himself slammed up against a wall. The woman's strength was incredible. She grasped the collars of his uniform and lifted his feet off the ground. The long nails on her fingers caressed his cheek. He tried to pull his eyes away from hers, but she held his gaze. The doctor was right, he stammered. You are Zeus. Correct, she said proudly. And let your race know I have returned for my atonement. She angled her head. He started to scream. He felt the pain begin above his eyes, as if a long, sharp blade was being driven directly into his brain. The pain spread, bursting blood vessels across his forehead. It swallowed his face, his neck, his chest. He felt his stomach burst. Zeus took her hand away and watched with satisfaction as the remains fell to the floor with a pleasing, wet sound. Then she picked up Sham's blaster and walked away. The asteroid shook again, the vibration sending the doctor and Romana rolling over to the door of the control center. We must get back to the TARDIS, Romana shouted. She tried to stand, but a further tremor knocked her down. Spigot called after her. They'll blast us to pieces. The doctor shook his head.
I think not. They haven't come all this way to blow us up. I think they're trying to dock.
The room shook once more.
And they're making a rare old mess of it.
The black ship turned for another attempt to connect with the docking ports built into the side of the asteroid. Its snout struck an outcrop of rock, and its aged engines wheezed in protest. A few seconds passed. The ship moved again. Its thick bulk turned slowly. The doctor pulled Pierpoint up. The old man was doing surprisingly well, the doctor thought. Probably kept himself in good shape, despite all those years sitting on drafty benches.
They're trying to dock, he called. How do I reach the docking port?
Pierpoint shook his head.
Head for the transmat, Doctor. You must evacuate, all of you.
The doctor gripped him tighter.
The docking port!
Spigot lurched over. I know the way, Doctor, he called as the room began to buck, shaking them and a variety of freestanding objects up and down. The docking port's down on level 4. It hasn't been used for 40 years. The doctor clapped him on the shoulder.
Good man, lead the way.
He followed Spigot to the door.
Look after K9,
he called to Romana. A thick tube slid slowly on hydraulic treads from the flanks of the black ship and connected with a small hatchway that was partly concealed between jagged formations of rock. Jets of steam hissed from the far end of the tube as internal clamps unclenched automatically. The tube was secured magnetically to the hatch. Well, we've stopped spinning for one thing, Spigot said as he and the doctor emerged from the lift on level 4.
That may not be good news, the doctor pointed out. They've almost certainly docked.
He raced forward along the corridor, but stopped short when he caught sight of something lying in a wet, bloody heap against a wall.
She's been here.
Spigot shook his head. She's a sick girl, all right. He pulled his blaster from his jacket. Looks like a bullet's going to be the only way. The doctor hurried on.
Be careful, Spigot, he said, and let me do all the talking.
The wall at the far end of the corridor had been blasted away, presumably by Sham's gun. Chunks of metal and oak panel were scattered about the hole. Spigot nodded in reply to the doctor's questioning glance. They had no need for a docking bay after the transmat was built, so they bricked it over. The doctor ducked his head to enter the hole. Beyond was a long tunnel of rock that widened and opened out into an open space that formed a kind of cavern. Built into the far side of the cavern was a large, circular metal hatchway. Standing before it, hands on hips, her back to them, was Zaius. Spigot leveled his blaster. Couldn't be better, he whispered, taking aim. One bullet in the back. End of problem.
Don't be a fool, the doctor said fiercely. What happens if you miss?
Spigot squared his jaw. I've never missed.
Not while there's another way. Stay here and don't shoot unless I tell you to.
That said, the doctor slipped away towards the hatch. Spigot muttered resentfully and tightened his grip on the blaster. As the doctor neared the hatch, he heard sounds from the other side, a chorus of animal grunts that was almost familiar. He couldn't make out any words. The hatchway seemed to be stuck, as if the new arrivals were having trouble opening it. He stepped forward bravely.
Hello, Margo.
The woman whipped around to face him. I am Zaius. The doctor was unprepared for the force of her personality. He took an involuntary step back as the cruel head tilted back, as if it was about to release more terror from its eyes. Then Zaius seemed to relent. The mask regarded him with interest. And you are the doctor. You are unlike the other normals. He shrugged.
I'm not sure how to take that.
Zaius came closer.
You speak casually for a man who is about to die.
About to die? The doctor said, indignant. I should hope not. There are a number of interesting things I haven't quite got round to yet.
He stared straight at her, daring to look into eyes that he knew could kill him in an instant.
Hello, Margo,
he said again.
Margo is dead,
Zaius said triumphantly.
I control this body.
She raised a hand and caressed the mask.
The fusion will soon be complete. The long darkness will be over forever. I shall be immortal.
Fight her, Margo, the doctor said softly. I know you are there.
Zaius tore her gaze away from him.
I will kill you, Doctor.
Her voice faltered and her knees trembled.
Help me,
she said in Margo's voice.
I do not want to kill. Help me, Doctor.
He let out a deep breath and ran his tongue over dry lips. The next stage of the plan was crucial.
Margo, you must take off the mask. Remove it. That's right.
Her hand raced slowly, reaching for the temples of the silver face. They faltered slightly. She gurgled, trying to suppress the alien voice of Zeus.
"That's it, Margo," the doctor encouraged her. "You can do it! Take off the mask!"
The tips of her fingers curled around the edges of the mask, where it had become joined with her skin. It started to come away. The hatchway blew open with a blast of air that knocked them both off their feet. The doctor was dimly aware of tramping, booted feet and pig-like snorts surrounding him. He shook his head to clear it, spat out a mouthful of dust, and attempted to rise. Standing over him was a stocky figure that was nearly 7 feet tall. It wore huge, black 16-hole boots, trousers made of a rough sacking material, and the shirt of the same covered by a jerkin of a shiny purple material. These clothes could not disguise the stooped shoulders and beast-like crouch of their owner. Gripped in one of the enormous, hairy hands that dangled from its long, thick arms was a dirty and very large rifle of futuristic design. The creature was dark-skinned. A mass of hair hung over its collar. The large dome of its head topped a heavy brow. The features beneath were simian, thin lips, a stubby nose, and dull eyes that flashed with anger and loathing. The creature could have been a missing link from Earth's prehistory, but the doctor knew it was not. He knew that it, and the others of its kind that were treading heavily through the hatch, were Ogrons.